Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the Sherman School Board Special Work Session to order. I'm going to use my outside voice since we're not wired for sound here at the table. That's okay because we're not going to be the ones who are primarily doing the talking. Although there may be some discussion later, and when you do need to talk, please go ahead and project as best you can because that's the way we're going to try to make this work. I'm aware of a meme that's been circulating around out there about if your school board is having an online meeting to talk about being at school, maybe you should be rethinking things. And I've been really acutely aware of that notion. And that's why we are doing an in-person meeting here, although we're not as a state ready and in Washington County ready to move to in-person education. We do have structures and systems in place that can make that safe, and we're trying to model that here tonight with our meeting. You can see that we're distanced at 6 feet. We have a limited number of people here in the room. It's a hybrid meeting with many people participating via Zoom. And in that context, I would like to welcome Sue Becker to her first ever live stream school board meeting. It's taken me 5 years to get here, but here we are. What I would like to ask is if people are speaking or later during the work session when we have dinner, if you're eating or drinking, go ahead and take your mask off. But other than that, although we're distanced, we're indoors and we're in an enclosed space, so I'd like to ask people to keep their mask on if they're not doing one of those things. Last thing I'll just mention, again, in terms of Zoom meetings, the chat function, we don't keep a permanent record of what's in the chat function, so please don't use it for something substantive that needs to be part of the permanent record. With that, I think I'm ready to turn it over to Dr. Burke.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see people in person, though safely distanced. Good to see all of you. So for our work session this afternoon, I'm just going to talk briefly about what our format is going to look like. So as Chair Allen and I were preparing for this evening, we talked about, will it be better for principals to present the slide deck and then have that be the launching point for that level for the conversations, or because you all saw the first draft of the slide deck last week, provided input, made adjustments to that, used those last night in our 3 forums. Is it really necessary to go through those slide decks tonight? We decided not to. We have them at the ready in case we need to refer to them. But the way that we're going to structure the work session, after I'm done providing the context and some comments, I will turn it over to Mr. Bennett, and he will take us through a procedural piece to discuss the CDL blueprint. And you can see that packet in front of you, and it's the CDL blueprint for each of our schools that are required to be submitted by August 17th. We will be submitting to ODE. So Mr. Bennett will go over that piece and then provide some information about where we are as a district and the really great, I would suggest sometimes around-the-clock work that has been happening all summer long. And I will talk more about that in my superintendent report and specifically as it relates to our administrative team. But then we will turn it over then to Ms. Dalby and Ms. Randalls, who, as you know, are the administrators over special programs. And they're going to share, and this was early morning this morning, I texted them and made this request. So thank you again for your flexibility, ladies. And I asked that they share the salient key pieces of the new guidance that came out just about 24 hours ago from ODE that is very dense, a lot of information, and a lot to sift through. So we are in no way prepared to talk about what does that new guidance mean for us, and this is what we think we're going to do about it. We are still just trying to separate out the chunks and learn about it. So please know that, and know that what Karen and Aaron are going to share is just to really acknowledge the pieces within that new guidance that we will be tackling. And then we want to have a conversation and open up with all of our building level and teaching and learning administrators who are here with us in this work session to just have a conversation with the board about the models and the work that's been done and answer your questions, really have this be an opportunity, you with them. They are the experts about what is happening at their levels to have that conversation. And so none of this will be a formal presentation, very much a conversation. And so as always in work sessions, we just want you to interject all along the way, ask questions. We've also, thank you so much to Nancy Stopper and Bettina Peiken, our association presidents, who have been part of our district level planning team. We meet every Thursday morning, not to be confused with our operations district level fall planning team, which meets 2 or 3 or so times a week. And so thank you for being here today, and we know, Nancy and Bettina, we so appreciate your partnership always, and certainly through these really challenging times, that the relationships that we have and your leadership is so appreciated. So thank you, and thank you for being here. And our greatest hope about that is so that you can provide a perspective and answer some questions that the board might have about how things look through your lens. What we certainly wouldn't ever do is put you in a position to need to approve or commit to some sort of model or thought that we're having. So thank you very much for being here. And Brady Strutz, our Associate Director of Technology in the Teaching and Learning Department, he has been working directly with the middle level planning team, and Marlene Carroll, who is back there waving. She is also from Teaching and Learning, as you know, and has been working with the elementary planning team and also being a support to the high school team. So from high school, you see Melissa Barron and Adam Mitchell. So they're the representatives here from the high school team. Middle level, Marianne Fenderhide and Millie Wilkinson. And happy birthday, Marianne. We know this is not their You're a trooper. And at the elementary level, Brandon Johnson and John Woolman. And you can see that we were very thoughtful and cognizant about the number of people we have on site here. So we have a principal from every level, and then somebody who's here along with them to help in the conversation. And exec team is here as well to offer supports and answer questions. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and we'll talk about the blueprint and here's some other thoughts from him.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy. It feels kind of good to use my outside voice a little bit. It's been a while. So each school is required to turn in an operational blueprint prior to August 17th. There is one section of the blueprint for comprehensive distance learning that is really straightforward. It's 3 questions, and those questions are, I'll just tell you what they are. You can read them on the packet in front of you. The 3 questions are essentially, why are you opening in comprehensive distance learning? The answer to that question for us is because the metrics put forth by the governor don't allow us to open the hybrid model. So the answer is wordier than that, but that's the answer to the question more or less. The second question is, attest that your plan meets the comprehensive distance learning guidance. So in there's a 1-sentence answer that says, we've read the guidance and we attest that our plans meet the guidance, or will meet the guidance when we open. The third question is, what's your plan for moving back to a hybrid? And that is a little bit more complex answer, but 1 is we have to meet the metrics to be able to open the site. 2, we've designed our comprehensive distance learning model, our hybrid model, to facilitate a smooth transition back and forth into, both into hybrid model, and should the case rates get worse again, back into comprehensive distance learning model, so that's in there. And then the other piece is there's going to be a brief transition period between the two, when schools open to train staff and health and safety protocols to allow for separate classrooms. To train out how to do emergency drills differently in a pandemic, it doesn't look the same with social distancing. You conduct a fire drill, yet you still need to conduct fire drills. And so there's things like that that we will need to train staff in before we can have kids back until there will be transition. And so that is the simple template that we're presenting to you tonight. These don't need to be approved by the board, we just need to submit these to you. There is a much more comprehensive template. Do you have any questions on that, Mark, first, before I talk about the blueprint template for opening in person, because it is significantly different? So we will submit these. They're essentially the same for every school because they're not really school-specific answers. And we will submit these to the Department of Education prior to August 17th, which is our deadline to meet that burden. We'll post them on our website. That's what we're required to do. It's actually not clear that we're required to post the CDL blueprints, but we're going to do it anyway just to make sure we're in compliance. The operational blueprint for opening schools for in-person instruction is a much more detailed document. It has 3 sections that we have to submit to the board and submit to the Department of Education and the local public health authority prior to opening in person. And in that document, that is where we get into the detailed health and safety things that we do, everything from maintaining social distancing to cohorting kids, to isolation protocols, to cohort contact tracing logs, to stable cohorts of kids, to, there are several sections, and it will be multiple pages. We need to have that completed before we offer any in-person instruction, even limited in-person instruction. We have that document largely completed. Once the governor announced on July 28th, I believe it was, that we were going to open the distance learning model, we took our foot off the gas a little bit of that because we knew we weren't going to need it right away, and shifted our energies more towards operating in a comprehensive distance learning model. Our plan is to complete that document sometime middle of next week and bring that to you for a discussion at the board meeting on the 26th, where we'll spend a little bit more time talking about it. The other reason we did that is we knew more guidance was coming out yesterday, which it did, and we knew that would change the template. So anything we brought in tonight, we figured we'd have to probably change and we bring back the next meeting anyway. So we just chose to pull back, mainly to give our teams grace, but also about review work. Any questions about just sort of the difference between those two?
Is this the last scheduled guidance that's going to be dropped on us before this AP 16 from the state?
This is the last, that's well put, this is the last scheduled guidance, this is the last big push, according to what the Department of Education told us yesterday. So
There will be more guidance.
there will be more guidance, yeah. That's why I was careful to use the word scheduled guidance for these. And they let us know, already a couple patches that they'll have to release with the guidance yesterday, and then as condition changes, we anticipate getting more guidance.
But this is the last guidance we have to consume and include in this the more comprehensive.
Well, I don't think that's actually right. I think every time this blueprint will have to be updated as we make changes. And there were more sections added to the operational blueprint that didn't exist prior to yesterday. There are now sections on the comprehensive blueprint that we have to address. And if a change comes and they make an adjustment to the blueprint template, then we will have to make that adjustment, fill in our plan for that, run it by the board, submit it to the local public health agency, and submit it to ODP each time that occurs.
If I could comment, I'm going to blend my hats probably pretty deeply tonight, but we sort of have the advantage of watching a lot of other cliff divers dive off the cliffs in other parts of the world and other parts of the country. You know, some of them are diving and entering the water pretty elegantly, and some of them are hitting the rocks pretty hard. And I think what we can expect is to see ongoing guidance come out that will incorporate what we're learning. There's a big research project going on right now having to do with kids and families and transmission. It will be a big additional piece of data on that, for instance. So I would expect us to be making adjustments pretty constantly.
And that's not inconsistent with, like, for example, how healthcare has been responding to this, where we've had changes coming all the time. And that's a good thing, because as we find problems, because once we turn the switch on, we begin to do this work, and our teachers begin to do this work, and everyone digs in, we're going to find the things that we put on paper aren't going to work, and we're gonna want them to change the guidance so that we can do it right. So I think it's not unexpected, it's really disruptive, but that's, I think, just the world as it is right now.
And I honestly believe that I'm certain that as we write this blueprint, not this one, but the more comprehensive one, we will find things that we put in place that don't play out in the hallway the way we've written them on paper. We will need to change our procedures and then change them in this document. I think it will be a living, breathing, evolving piece as we get better at what we do.
And that was a piece that I tried to emphasize in my opening remarks last night, and others did as well, but we wanted to make sure that people understood. Just because you hear us talking about August 17th and we're having a forum on August 11th, don't misconstrue that as some sort of disingenuous kind of rubber stamp along the way, because we expect there to be changes all the way up through the first day of school and likely beyond as we monitor and adjust.
Any more questions about the blueprints before we move on to talking about instructional models and things of that nature? Okay, perfect, thank you. So, before we turn it over to Ms. Reynolds and Ms. Dolby, I just want to talk a little bit about sort of where we are as a team. As we continue to make progress in developing our models, the pace has really ramped up since late July. As you can imagine, we've had some pretty significant and important guidance in late July, which gave us the direction we needed to follow and change some of our thinking. More significant changes came out yesterday. We're still in the process of reviewing. One thing we really worked really hard at all levels, the district level and each school has worked really hard to do is involve a broad variety of stakeholders in the work. That includes everything from what Dr. Cordy mentioned about meeting with our association presidents and a group of administrators every Thursday morning throughout the summer, to meeting 3 times a week as an operations steering committee, to at school levels involving broad members of staff. Each of them is a little bit different at every level, but there have been opportunities for staff to be involved in the visioning process and some of the work. There's smaller groups of teachers and administrators working to develop models as we speak. And I just wanted to make it clear that our teams are really trying to do a good job, or not trying, they're doing a good job of building in a broad swath of people. As the work has progressed and the runway shortens, it becomes more and more challenging to do that work because we have to make more decisions and we have to make them quickly. The broader the swath of people you bring in, the harder it is to make decisions. And so right now we're really working hard to continue that balance of buying and getting feedback from teams and bringing them to the table to vet things, and at the same time just making decisions because teachers report in 2.5 weeks. And so I just wanted to point that out, that we're working, the teams are doing a really good job of that. And just on that note, there are some things we've been careful about not sharing very explicitly in a public domain because we don't want to get ahead of the work of our teams. And if our teams haven't had a chance to weigh in on something and we start making very public announcements about something, that provides challenges for them because it feels very disingenuous. And so we've been really cautious about that and careful about that. We incidentally, not unintentionally, did some of that this spring as we rushed to put a model together, and it just doesn't build trust and confidence in our teams. And so we're really working hard to strike that balance, and sometimes we're just very cautious about how we approach things of that nature. Just kind of wanted to bring up to speed on sort of the 50,000-foot view of sort of what it looks like from my lens, and I'm sure it looks slightly differently than that, or a lot different than that, from our principal's lens as being at that, from that 10,000 foot level. If nobody has any questions about that, then I'll move on and turn it over to our special program directors.
And before we do that, just a couple more comments that I'd like to make. Part of it is just procedural. So when we get into the conversation around the work going on at all of the levels here in a few minutes, we for sure want to be able to hear from our colleagues who are joining us via Zoom. But just know that we might, so just speak up and into the conversation. Don't hesitate at all, team, because it's kind of hard to see and manage to see when a mic is unmuted and so forth. So please just absolutely jump on into the conversations at any and all points. And two more things. Just wanted to also note that what might seem missing, because it is from tonight's conversation, is all of the work that's being done to our facilities and purchasing of masks and shields and ventilation and all of those special filters, like all of that is happening. And Ken and team and Jim are just really pursuing all of those pieces. Chair Allen and I opted for that not to be a part of the conversation tonight. Surely if you have questions, we'll answer those. But the specific part of that presentation will be on August 26th when we meet next. And last but certainly not least, to Brad Wise, who is helping us with technology and the live stream, and to Christine Andre. Huge thanks and appreciation for all of the work that you do and that you've done for this meeting to live stream and to get us here in person and all of those other pieces. So thank you so much. And for last night, which had so many moving pieces, I don't even know how to get my mind around it. So thank you so much. And Brad, thank you. And with that, now Ms. Dolly and Ms. Randall.
Good afternoon, Board of Education. Oops, did that sound as bad there as it did here? Okay, I'll keep going unless someone gives me a signal. As we continue to review the guidance provided by ODE, we keep at the heart of our work important guiding principles as we plan for the new school year. First and foremost, we strive to center our work in equity. We recognize the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 has for certain families and communities. This certainly includes some of our students with disabilities and our emerging bilingual students. In addition, we must ensure the safety and wellness of our students and staff. We have the unique opportunity and special programs to support and cultivate connections and relationships with our families and students. It will be crucial that we continue to receive feedback and input from our community and that we're flexible enough to meet the needs of our students during this challenging time. So with these principles in mind, we prepared some notes on the most recent guidance provided yesterday. And we will review that with you now. Just as Gary mentioned, this information is dense and we certainly have more work to do, but we wanted to share with you some high points. And then for our next steps, we look forward to partnering with our building administrator colleagues as we use these guidelines to further develop our plans for the upcoming year. So while we are operating in the comprehensive distance learning model, the majority of each student's services under IDEA, Section 504, and services for our emergent bilingual students should be mostly teacher facilitated and can be synchronous or asynchronous to meet service requirements through distance learning. When considering asynchronous methods, the instruction must be specific to student challenges and skills. So we'll be able to meet this requirement through different modalities, including online video conferencing, in addition to offline approaches. We also will need to continue to provide access for all learners to general education instruction, teachers, educators, and peers as appropriate. Overall, the guidance requires an increased focus on teacher-facilitated learning time, which will include more direct instruction with learning specialists, speech-language pathologists, and instructional assistants, in addition to increased opportunities for peer-to-peer interactions. Additionally, Districts are expected to review all IEPs for compatibility with the instructional model the school is operating under. Teams will need to create an IEP that can be implemented across different learning models to the extent possible. Prior to the beginning of school, case managers will reach out to each student and family to discuss the needs of each individual student. This will require professional development regarding the updated guidance, as well as time for staff members to host these conversations with families. Now, Ms. Randalls will talk about the new guidance as it relates to evaluations and child find, in addition to the guidelines around limited in-person instruction.
Thank you, Karen. So the first topic I'm going to touch on is students attending for limited in-person instruction. If there are no cases of confirmed, no confirmed cases of COVID-19 among school staff and students in the past 14 days, we can consider limited in-person instruction for some student groups. So here's what we know so far. Schools can do some limited in-person instruction based on educational, relational, or instructional need. The guidance suggests that we should first consider how to provide educational services in a comprehensive distance learning mode, and that in-person instruction cannot replace this requirement. In order to determine the needs of students, we must track data, as we always do, and track educational progress for all students. For students in special education, this means progress in both on their IEP goals and with the general education curriculum. For students with disabilities, based on data, the IEP team or 504 team may need to meet after a period of time in the CDL model to discuss adaptations, modifications, and additional options for learning, up to and including access to limited in-person instruction. When we're considering services on site, instruction should focus on skills that cannot otherwise be taught via CDL, or for students who are unable to access that specific instruction in the CDL model. Decisions cannot be based on disability, race, gender, religion, or sexual orientation. Student participation in limited in-person instruction must be voluntary, and we cannot require this for any element of a course or grade. Cohorts of students cannot exceed 10 students, and they must be stable. Students cannot be a part of more than 2 cohorts, including for transportation purposes in any given week. And limited in-person instruction is limited to 2 consecutive hours maximum per day. So regarding evaluations and child find for special education, our obligation to continue to identify and evaluate students remains intact. Many of our observations can take place and have been taking place via an online platform, such as rating scales and some observations or interviews. Limited in-person guidance, the guidance around limited in-person contacts gives us the ability to do some one-on-one evaluations for special education as we need to. However, we cannot require any students to attend these evaluation sessions. Pending evaluations that are in progress due to the spring closure will be prioritized in the fall. So during COVID-19, the requirements and protections for students with disabilities and who are emerging bilingual speakers have not been altered, and we think that's a good thing to protect our students. We must continue to consider the most effective ways to provide parent participation opportunities, identification and evaluation, and a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment possible for our students. That concludes our review of the new information. Thank you.
So we know that's a lot, and so let's just have a conversation about that. Thank you, you guys.
So I have a question. What they raised was interesting about, oh, I'm sorry, I'll speak louder so that you can hopefully hear me on the screen. What you raised was interesting about if we go 14 days without students or staff being positive, but do we have any mechanism, are we thinking of any mechanism for how we even track whether or not someone's positive? Because that's requiring 5,100 students plus staff to self-report COVID to us, and that's gonna be fun.
Actually, it does. Local public health would be aware of a school connection as part of their case investigation and would make us aware. And that was kind of the pattern back in the spring when schools were still open at the very beginning. Local public health would let, in fact, 3 of the first cases were all school involved, and they let the district know. And the district was able to do whatever was appropriate at that time. Back in those days, Heather and I had a deal that the first words out of my mouth when I called her were, "You don't have a case."
Multiple times a day, and when you forgot and didn't say that right out of the gate, it was problems.
Pat, given the case, the delay in reporting some cases, I mean, I know that most of our stuff is coming in within 72 to 96 hours. How do we, 14 days, you could have something that comes in and then trips you even after you started.
Yeah, so this is kind of the challenging set of trade-offs that this involves. If you leap to the more generalized issue of kids present in school buildings in a hybrid or a full-time model, or K through 3, so 10 cases per 100,000 or 30 cases per 100,000. That's really aimed at that very idea of driving the case rate down low enough that delay in finding out about a case doesn't become as high a risk. Here, what we do is I think what the guidance tries to do is to balance that heightened risk because there are more cases with much more stringent cohorting and time limits and those kinds of things, so that if there is a case that's been delayed, that the protective factors have been put in place to try to offset the effects of that. It's not perfect by any means, but that's the balance that's trying to be struck, especially for a population that, among several populations, really does need a degree of in-person service.
Yeah, they're also a more vulnerable population, which is.
Yeah, lots of trade-offs that are tough.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Related to what Jessica just asked. So with the 14 days for within Sherwood, does that also mean that we have to meet the more limited county requirements, which I think was like 30 cases per 100K or something like that? Are those tied together, or is this required just in Sherwood?
For the 14 days,
For the
no,
14
that's
days.
Sherwood, it's for, yeah.
Okay, so if we're 14 days, we can start doing the limited in person, regardless of what's going on in the county.
You still have to send to sections 1 through 3 in the Ready Safe Schools guidance.
Okay, so there's a
That's a good question.
what?
I have the same question.
Okay.
I think it's the
And
answer or.
is the link between the more restrictive guidance, the 10 cases per 100K, or the 30 cases per 100K, where you kind of lost some of those sections?
Let me take a shot at this. The limited instruction aside from K3 is based on what's going on in the district. 14 days without a case with a student or a staff member, it's irrespective of what's going on in the county around us. The others have, but there are requirements. The Ready Safe Schools are the things about cohorts of 10, no more than 2 cohorts, 2 hours, all that stuff. That's what Dr. Gordy was referring to. The other cases, K through 3 and 4 through 12, relate to what's going on in the entire county around us.
So limited, to be clear, limited in-person instruction is related to kids with an IEP, with special needs, with ESL. It's not related to the general population.
The most recent, the guidance from yesterday includes being able to make exceptions for families that are rural, that live so far out that they don't have reliable connectivity and can't do the distance learning online work. And so that's one example of the additional potential exceptions that just came out yesterday.
CTE is another one.
Right.
You need to be physically present there to do it. If I could remind board members, if you could take your mask off while you talk, we're having a hard time being able to hear on the feed and use your outdoor.
So those exceptions, CTE and special education, it is relying on the 14 days and then these couple of other things that we're safe learning. But not as soon as
And that's correct, but it is a larger group than just CTE and special education. There's a variety of kids that need additional support, including emerging bilinguals, kids that need social emotional support. There's people who don't have internet access, like Dr. Cordy referred to. It's a broad swath. And deciding which of those students at a 1,700 person high school when you're limited to 250, how you decide who comes in and which teachers come in to teach them all the protocols. There's a lot there on that side too, in terms of working with our staff to figure out who that might be, which teachers might come in, which other staff might come in. And we have not even begun those conversations. I just wanted to make it's not as easy as I thought about it. I think it's important guidance. I think it's really helpful guidance. And I also think it's something that's really thoughtful about how we approach it.
And in another superintendent-only Zoom meeting that was called pretty much in the last minute that happened this morning to offer additional clarification on the guidance from yesterday. This consumed a big portion of that 90 minutes or whatever it was, and that was so it's up to districts. Here are all of these additional potential exceptions. It's up to districts to decide what or if or what combination, to Mr. Bennett's point, to do and to prioritize, and then that conversation with our staff about that. You know, we're already knowing that those conversations need to happen around the K-3 exceptions that came out in the first, not the most recent, but the time before guidance. And so this just adds many more complicated layers, quite frankly.
So is it safe to say that our approach right now would be that the first population that we're going to try to deal with are the special needs kids and make sure we've got that worked out before we try to move to other populations, or are we going to try to move across a broad swath of populations right after the gate?
One of the pieces of guidance that was helpful for me is that we should aim to provide access and an education to all students in the comprehensive distance learning model first. And so that was really helpful in understanding how to navigate this. The way that we would engage in conversations around is it appropriate for students with disabilities and which students is it appropriate for is by really tracking that progress in the CDL model and meeting with families. And it's really an IEP team decision and how we navigate it. So as a district, I would say that we're not able to make any unilateral decisions in regards to that population of students. But really we have to plan for it and know that those decisions are based on individual need and based on the data that we collect after we try and implement a CDL model.
Just a comment. I'm very happy that answered those requirements for the families that were hotspots don't work for them. That we have some flexibility there. So that was a worry of mine. So I'm very happy.
Other questions or thoughts?
I'm just really glad that there's some flexibility for the district to decide which sets of kids to prioritize in that, because I think there are subsequent impacts on staff and on opening of schools that are incredibly challenging and potentially disruptive as we try and be partially open versus fully open, and then still trying to deliver comprehensive distance learning while also trying to figure out limited in person. And I think I look forward to hearing what the full team thinks those prioritizations ought to be and what's most necessary to do in a limited in-person model versus not. I'm also interested in whether the guidance, I don't know whether other districts are doing a cloud campus like model, and whether the guidance gives flexibility so that if it's a cloud campus kid who gets ill, but it's not ever really going to be on Sherwood campus, whether if one of those kids are sick, whether that disrupts the in-person learning for everyone, because that seems like if you've got somebody who's never going to be there, but that triggers the inability to offer in-person services for at least 14 days for other people, that can get real disruptive.
So I'd like to maybe, if you can, broaden some of the questions to a little bit outside the limited in person. And first one I've got is around the learning management platform, and I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about we had a lot of feedback on the screen that was a challenge for families, and so to a degree, and a challenge for teachers as well. Can we talk about what we did to make it easier for families to navigate as well as teachers? And talk a little bit about the choice of Seesaw at the elementary level. I think we're probably all getting inundated now with emails about products. Welcome to my world. I was getting emails about testing materials and contact tracing and all kinds of things for sale. Could you talk a little bit about that subject?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to turn to my colleagues across the room there, and let's address this at every level. Around the LMS platform and what we're doing to make it easier for families, and at the elementary level, that and why did we choose Seesaw? And Brady and Marlene will want to make sure that you are absolutely in this conversation as well. So I'm going to start at the high school level and we'll work backwards.
So we are still using Canvas, and that will be our learning management system. And I echo exactly what you mentioned, Sharon, that we recognize fully that there were a lot of different ways that teachers implemented Canvas and how they posted assignments that made it really challenging for our families to navigate. And frankly, it made it really challenging for us at the school to navigate because there were so many different things going on in Canvas. And so what we are working on right now is in conjunction with Brady and Marianne and Millie is a secondary kind of commitments around Canvas use. And so we're working to develop that collaboratively so that we can get on board with our teachers and say, this is the expectation, and maybe more than that, like this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to use Canvas, and it will be consistent across the secondary level. And so we're in works with teachers and with, like I said, all of the people in this room to put that in place. And so that's our major plan right now. And then having the opportunity to work more in depth with our staff was also something that we are very thankful for, because as you guys know, in the spring, there wasn't really a lot of opportunity for us to even support teachers in learning how to use Canvas and do it, which is kind of like, we're using Canvas, go ahead and get everything on there as quickly as possible. And so we get to take advantage of pre-service this year and have some really intentional professional development for staff to make sure that they understand those expectations and then can implement them.
Just to piggyback on that, thank you. Just to piggyback that on that, the specific training, the expectations for consistency for families. The other thing we just talked about at the middle level just today with Brady and Jake and I around our incoming sixth graders, where this will be a new platform for them. And how can we reach out to families? And so we don't have the details of that yet, but being really intentional about PD, professional development, so to speak, for our families and for our incoming sixth graders, and what could that look like? And we have some ideas of what that could look like, but that's going to be something that we're going to need to really be intentional about providing for that in particular grade level.
This is Brady. Hi. So excellent points by my colleagues there. And one more additional piece to add. I just want to say another piece that we've talked about and that we're going to be really intentional about is you know, this is the new front door to our school. This is the way people come into our building now. And so we're really working with our teams. How can we make this a more human experience? And that's a huge part of our approach to address sort of the SEL needs of our students, the social emotional learning pieces that are attached with building a comprehensive distance learning model and students experiencing education during a pandemic. And so we're really working to find some ways to just make it a more human experience and bring the people that are behind these systems to the forefront as much as we can. And that's, you know, things as simple as on your homepage, a picture of every teacher, and then working from there on up.
Mr. Woolman, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, sir. So at the elementary level, you're probably aware that in the spring we were utilizing two platforms. For kindergarten through second grade, we were using the Seesaw platform, which was a dive into the deep ends for all of our staff, our students, and our families. It was not a program that many of us had been utilizing, although some of our colleagues have. For our third, fourth, and fifth graders, we were using the Google Classroom, which was appropriate for us at that time because that was more utilized at the 3, 4, 5 level as part of their daily instruction when we were in the building. One of the things that we found as we started diving into the platforms is that we essentially had two choices for a robust program. One was Seesaw and one was Canvas. And as user-friendly as Google Classroom can be, it's not as robust and as deep as what we need to be able to provide a proper learning management system for our students and for our families. And so knowing that we were kind of looking at these two choices, we have half of our elementary team had done the deep dive in Seesaw already. Canvas was going to be new to all of us. And my understanding of the Canvas program is very, it's got a lot of bells and whistles to it that are really effective, that may not be appropriate or needed at the elementary level. And so the decision was made is let's take what we learned with Seesaw in the spring. Let's get all of our classroom teachers and support staff up to speed on that. We're going to provide professional development for teachers, for families, and for students as well. We're going to create modules for those. And if part of that program, it allows us to provide a richer and deeper experience for kids. For example, at the district level, we can push something out to all of our elementary school classrooms. Or as the administrator, I can push something out to just my fifth graders if there's something. It's just a cleaner system. And so we're looking forward to it. You know, in conversations that we had with our core planning team today, there wasn't a lot of concern brought up about it. I think we're more focused on the instruction part of it, and the platform will support the quality instruction.
So elementary crew, one of the things that I think we're seeing on social media today after our forum last night, but specific to the elementary level, seems to be some questions from families about why Seesaw. What can you talk a bit about just that piece of it and how what that's going to look like to provide that communication and reach out the way that we need to have those conversations.
Yeah, similarly to the middle level, I think in the spring we had a lot of inconsistencies with Seesaw use. There's a lot of different ways to push out assignments or tasks or link things. And I think just like within Canvas, it was a little bit unpredictable for parents. And so I would imagine that some of our public comment reflects that. And so our work will be the same as the Canvas work to create some common expectations for our staff. The runway was short in the spring and we were all learning together and just didn't have the time or the knowledge at that point to really establish some clear expectations. And so that's going to be a first step of work for us, is to be really clear with teachers about where assignments will post or where families will go to find this link, so that every single class knows what is expected and parents with kids at multiple grade levels have the same look and features when they enter Seesaw. Along with that, the training was not robust in the spring. We sent out, Seesaw has a lot of great training videos, and that was pretty much the extent of our training. Was here's a great webinar you can watch on Seesaw, or a parent support And we've learned since then that our families and our staff need more. And so we are committed for that PD week for staff to really getting them in and training them in all of the bells and whistles and the components and how we're going to support students. And then likewise with families, especially in those one-on-one check-ins that we plan to do at the beginning of the school year, to really take time to help families, to answer questions. I know we've been visiting with Brady about the potential of even when families come to check out a device, that maybe there's some information that they can receive at that point as well, for families who aren't familiar. And so just really being thoughtful about the information that we share out. But I think as Mr. Wilmuth spoke, just really looking at the guidelines and the requirements for an LMS, there were really the two systems that we had to choose from, Canvas and Seesaw. And so that guided a lot of our decision in where we landed, just knowing that Canvas is a lot more complicated, and we didn't know that we would find success in getting our teachers up and running as quickly within that, and it didn't seem as user-friendly for younger grades as the Seesaw. And so we decided that we would dedicate our time and our efforts into really supporting one platform that we know worked well on a lot of levels, but improving the areas that needed improvement.
I would just add one minor thing to that. In the feedback we also got from families was that some families had to learn 3 different platforms: Seesaw for their 2nd grader, Google Classroom for their 5th grader, and Canvas for their 7th grader. And then you multiply that times different teachers doing things different ways, and there were some real challenges there. And so by reducing the number of platforms from 3 to 2, and by reducing the way that teachers use platforms to many to few, we really believe that we can shrink the number of different, we can really make this much more manageable and streamlined for families, as opposed to what happened in the spring, which was a challenge for families and a challenge for our teachers and students. It was a challenge all the way around.
Well, I just want to say, I think it's great that there'll be a continuum for the middle and upper grades. I think that that's going to be really helpful. And my question is, are we looking at this in terms of how we deploy this over the long term so that we're able to, I mean, we are preparing for this next year, hoping, at least I'm hoping that that by the end of next year, we are all back in the classroom and this is behind us. Hope springs eternal. But we still have winter storms and we still have other things. So it's the thinking that by going to these platforms, we're planning for the long term in terms of consistency and being able to do this. And let me just say, some clear expectations for teachers will improve the social emotional health of my household, where we had lots of conversations about, well, I don't care that 2 teachers are holding it. It says that you've got multiple assignments. What's going on here? So that will, the world will be better in my household, so thank you. But regardless of that, I'm really interested. Are we planning for the long term here so that we can deploy this and really make clear to our community that this isn't about just dealing with the pandemic, but it's also about how we better create integrated learning opportunities in the long run.
Yeah, one of the strengths of the elementary of Seesaw is the ability to use that within live instruction. And so that's going to be part of our thoughtful rollout into a hybrid model, is that even when students are able to return to face-to-face instruction, that a portion of their interaction still within the day uses the Seesaw platform, whether that's a teacher presenting a live lesson in the class as they normally would, and then kids returning to their seat to do a portion of their tasks via the learning platform, but that continued use throughout the year so that if and when we're needing to move back and forth between CDL and a hybrid model, that our kids are able to do that as seamlessly as possible.
And I think at the high school level, this was prior to my arrival, so but the Canvas was implemented at the high school level 3 years ago. Is that about right? So more than 1 year ago. With that intention, with the intention of it being something that is interactive and an opportunity for teachers and students to use this digital platform for learning. And we know that as we're preparing kids for their next steps, whatever those may be, that they're going to need to be technologically savvy. We are seeing college, and we know there's colleges across the nation right now are moving online and utilizing a platform very similar, if not actually Canvas. And so this is a lifelong skill. And so yes, we're 100% considering this as an opportunity for us to help students start to prepare for those next steps. And one of those is using technology well.
And to go further back from when Melissa got here, one of the goals with Canvas was to do exactly what we're talking about, trying to streamline and make it kind of a uniform way for kids to be able to access materials and content and dates and all of those kind of things. And so we've done a lot of PE, but when you do that, when you're in a typical model of the past couple of years, the urgency and the need is not necessarily there. And you have teachers who love that kind of stuff and they grab on and they're fantastic at it. And you have teachers who have done it for a long time or they're just not interested or it doesn't fit their sort of vision. And this, one of the side benefits is that this is it's the need for everybody. And so I see coming out of this a very uniform way to deliver that stuff because now you have to. So I think everybody's attaching to it. And so I think, coming out of the pandemic, there's going to be a lot of positives in that realm. That we're going to have a lot more uniform use of these kind of things.
And at the elementary level, we saw that, back in March when we thought, we'll just finish the school year and everything will be normal come September. Teachers asking, can we keep this platform? I'd like to be able to use it in my classroom daily with my kids. And so that said a lot about it too. After the recovery from trying to figure it out, starting to see it could be a really very beneficial educational tool for our kids.
And I think at the middle level, when we rolled it out, it was a soft rollout, which I think didn't help us in March because there were some people that were so much further along and familiar, and they were great with their colleagues to get them up to speed. But we were all over the board because it was some parts were optional, some parts weren't. When we did do our professional development, our math was tied with the CPM, and then science was tied with Amplify, and so their PE looked different. So to Adam's point, it really did in March force the hand, so to speak. And so I totally see it being a long haul and it being effective.
So, different question. I think when we look back, one of the cultural touchstones of this time will be mom and dad and 3 kids all at home at the same time trying to work and do school, and that's for the parents who were able to work from home and do that while their kids were in school versus juggling kids in school and needing to physically be at work and all those kinds of things. And it was like when we look back, it'll probably be a memory with chuckles, but not right now. Right now it's pretty painful, and one of the most common things I hear and experience are the struggles around how to manage that. Can we talk a little bit about what we learned from the spring experience and how we're going to work to provide supports for working parents with kids in school or not in school, as the case may be?
Yeah, that's a real struggle. One that Marlene and I know personally very well, having little kiddos at home and trying to balance that work and school completion. Having my own kids participate in distance learning, I know the feedback was reflective that a lot of our video, right, just sitting kid down and watching a video was hard. There wasn't a lot of engagement, and maybe they weren't listening, and then they didn't know what the task was to follow. And so a big hope is that moving to more live instruction, right, an opportunity where a teacher's there to facilitate that learning through a Zoom platform will help a lot with that engagement and hopefully take some of that piece off of parents to allow the kids to be able to check in and ask questions of the teacher as they're participating, which doesn't obviously alleviate the need for a parent to be able to help a kid log on and to get set up with Zoom, and we don't want to minimize knowing that that's going to be work for families too. But in some regard, our hope is that a lot of that can be alleviated once they're set up in the platform, that a teacher could take on a little bit of that support role, especially in a small group instruction setting. We're hoping to partner with childcare providers as much as we can and as much as they are willing. I know that Champions, for example, has been really open and asking help us to help our students. What can we do? We were able to get students devices to use at Champions in the spring. We had some IAs actually that worked in the building and also for Champions that were able to kind of push in and help. And so as much as we can maximize opportunities like that to help students also with work completion within a childcare setting would be one of our hopes. And I think also important just being flexible, right? There's an accountability piece there for attendance, yes, but also knowing that these live session times aren't going to work for all families, and some families may need to complete work after or at a different time, or maybe even on a different day. And so providing some options for families to be flexible, whether that's watching recordings later or possibly offering some time for office hours outside of our normal school day, if we have the ability to do that to some extent, so that we can work with families as much as possible to meet the needs for kids, because especially at K-3, it's a real challenge for sure for families, and one that is definitely not lost on our team. And one that's also a real challenge to problem solve with limited resources, but another one of the reasons why our team is committed as soon as the metrics are met and it's safe to do so, to getting our K-3, as many of those students back on campus as many days a week as possible.
I completely agree with that, Pat. I think it's a real challenge, especially for people who have to be in person. So in my world, that's nurses and CNAs and folks that are doing dietary stuff. In this world, it's our own staff. And so I'm real curious. I know that there was a staff survey about childcare. I'd be really interested in hearing if there's any follow-up on that at this point. Because I know that what we're hearing at my own employers, that some districts are able to offer childcare options where they'll do what Champions is doing and actually support distance learning. There are an awful lot of childcare options that are like, and we're not doing anything related to distance learning, so we'll keep your kid alive and exercise, but other than that, good luck to you.
So I'll start and then hand it off to you, Jim. So this is something that is, you're gonna see an update about in the Friday updates this week. So from that, it's an important topic and one that we are vigorously pursuing. And so 26-ish% of the respondents from our staff said they will need some help with childcare. So we did another survey just recently, as you know. It was not anonymous because we need to start identifying who these people, who our staff members are that need childcare, and so that we can start getting clear about numbers, because Champions, who is a longtime partner of ours, is very eager to help us and actually stand up additional supports in our modular buildings at the, what was the Hopkins campus. And so Jim is leading that work. And so I'm going to hand it off to him to talk about all the intricacies. We're really excited about continuing to grow that partnership and what it could mean for our staff. Jim.
Thank you. The original survey did have about 26% of the respondents that said they would need support. Extrapolating that number across our district, that was quite a large number that I was concerned about. The most recent survey has shown that right now we have about 29 students that need some sort of childcare, 5 of which are under kindergarten. So we have about 24 in the K-5 range, and working with Champions and providing them the spaces they'll need at Hawksview in the 3 portals that are to be north or east of the building. I'm not sure exactly which direction that is. That will give them, we believe, the campus space to do small cohorts, so that way they can maintain all the rules they need to and increase their capacity. If it extends beyond that, we have additional portals around the district that are already dedicated to Champions, and so we have a fair amount of space for them to use, and it's a matter of ramping up to make sure that they can. One of the questions we asked of staff in this most recent survey was, if you were to choose not to use Champions, what are the reasons? And not surprisingly, one of them is that they're concerned about their kids being exposed to other kids. And so that's information that's helpful to Champions so that they can really understand that concern and be able to address that. They're already following the rules, but to be able to fully explain how they're following the rules and how they can, do their very best to maintain the safety and welfare children is important.
Can someone at the elementary level talk about what the first day of kindergarten looks like?
We're meeting with our kindergarten team in the morning at 9 a.m. So that is definitely on our radar to start planning in the morning. Having taught kindergarten myself for several years, I know that it's going to be difficult. And so that team does an amazing job within the building and have already started brainstorming and sending us ideas. What would it look like if they came to pick up their school supplies and we got to stand 10 feet apart outside and take the first day of school picture, or some kind of way to let students feel included in that process. In the past, we've used kind of this ramp up placement. One of the things we'll be discussing tomorrow is that appropriate? Maybe given this new guidance released yesterday, we haven't looked through all components as it relates to kindergarten, but it may create some opportunities to bring small groups of kindergarten students in to just kind of get acclimated and they don't know the peers in their class like our 1st through 5th grade students do. They don't know the teachers or have seen their faces in the halls and stuff. Finding some ways to build connections and relationships will be important. That could potentially look different where we land, right? Maybe placement is different this year and it's not this ramp up process. Maybe we use a different system to place kids thoughtfully with teachers so that they know who their teacher is from the start and they begin to build those relationships from day one. But it's definitely something that we are knowing we need to dedicate time to, and we're starting that work in the morning.
Yeah, and we also know that our kindergarten teachers are much more creative than we are, and have been working amongst themselves, both within their grade level teams at the school as well as across the district. I met with my kindergarten teachers this afternoon, and they have a lot of really great ideas, and really focusing in on how do we build this relationship, how do we build a community. You know, kindergarten on a typical year is a month of tears and tired kids and learning routines, and how do I deal with losing, because I always win the games when I play against mom and dad. All of those kind of social skills that we know are going to be important. So things like having those one-on-one conversations with the kindergartner and his or her parents, and then hosting a parent evening for the kids don't even know the intricacies of our literacy instruction, but parents will have questions about that. So providing some of those opportunities for parents to ask those questions, and really giving them some concrete advice, such as when we get into a hybrid model, it is really important that your child know how to tie his or her shoes, because we can't do it, right? They have to be able to go to the bathroom and button their pants by themselves. We've got those types of skills, encouraging families to work on now, in looking ahead to when we are able to have our little friends back in the building.
I have a curriculum related question. It's not ask that one. Okay, so what I've been hearing these past few meetings is about additional online resources that we've been able to, in some cases, purchase. For example, Units of Study, which is the English for elementary and middle school, and Bridges, which is elementary math. What I remember a little bit from Amplify, which is science in the middle school, I believe, is that they seem to have a lot of online resources there already. But my worry is CPM, which is middle and high school math, particularly for 6th graders coming into it for the first time, and for 9th graders coming to the high school doing algebra. Are there online resources, additional online resources, CPM, that we'll be able to take advantage of? That's not anything, I haven't heard anything discussed about CPM in particular.
I guess I can speak to it twofold. I had a 6th grader last year, and then see what goes on in high school, and I would answer yes. I think I probably observed it more from a parent standpoint. My son was able to, there's a lot of helpful hints on it. It's very easy to guide through. It's interactive. So at least from I'm a high school guy answering more of a school perspective, but I know I've heard similar things at the high school as well. So my experience, both personally and professionally, is that it did a good job of doing exactly what you're asking.
I would just add that I think that there was a lot of that being utilized when we were working order as well. So I think that the transition is smoother now.
I was just going to add that a big part of CPAM is, as is with Bridges, is the collaboration and student-to-student interaction. And so our math teachers are already talking about how they can use the existing curriculum as it is, which was a lot online, even in the building, but how they can use a Zoom breakout rooms so students can still be collaborating and do that partner group work and that thinking out loud and that student-to-student discourse that we know is so important. So I think melding that with the strategies that we use in the building to really take things to the next level, I think is kind of where we're at.
In addition to all of those things, every single one of our partnership curriculums that we've adopted, they're aligned to the standards, and they have already been preparing for this. They knew that there would be many schools across the nation and world that would be opening up in a comprehensive distance learning model, and they are right there, whether they're providing new resources that are online or recreating a scope and sequence that is targeted for students learning in the online model. And so accessing those and using those to implement our program is definitely a priority so that we can support our students and their families while they're in the online program.
Eric, do you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say, so it sounds like at least as far as math or the partner programs go, it sounds like they're making several improvements, so it should be better than it was even last spring.
Definitely. They have kind of rallied around the idea that, most schools will be operating in and out of CDL.
So if I can come back to elementary for a minute, the metrics for us to be able to have in-person K through 3 is 30 cases per 100,000 per week over 3 weeks and 5% positive tests. In Washington County, if we get down to the 30 cases, we'll probably be at 5%. And that works out to about 27 cases per day. And right now we're in the low 40s. So realistically, we're maybe not that far away from being able to meet that metric. I'm wondering kind of what the Ready, Set, Go plan looks like for being able to get back there. If we go a week with cases at that level, do we start doing something thinking that there might then be 2 more weeks, or do we wait till there's 3 weeks and do something? Can someone kind of talk through what to be prepared for there?
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about, I talked about with my kindergarten team today, and it's come up, and is with regards to that, because they asked that very question. We're getting close to the metric. Are we going to have time to get our rooms put together and all of that? The short answer is yes, but I said just we need to pay attention. We're not going to wait till the end of the third week where we've been seeing cases below 30 with all the metrics, and then say, okay, now we need to prepare. Things that we're doing now are setting up rooms or having teachers thinking about their classrooms and what are the essential things that need to be in those classrooms. How can we spread out the 35 square foot radius for each of our students? And be thinking about, it might mean we have to move people around because we have some classrooms that are larger, and based on the number of students that are enrolled in that grade level or the number of students that have chosen to not do the Sherwood Cloud Classroom will affect where grade levels may end up being housed in a hybrid model. For example, we have a number of rooms that have a split wall that you can open it up and you can make a 1,500 square foot room. Whereas other parts of our building don't have that. So we've been doing that work to be thinking about what the spaces would look like and staffing as well. So it may be that we need to utilize our instructional assistants a little bit differently, utilizing our music and PE specials a little bit differently in order to support us getting as many of our students back in the building as we can.
I would add to that just a little bit. I think there's even things we need to do now to start strong partnerships we have with our associations, is having conversations with them about this now, because this is, you're talking about some staff returning to work in person and others not returning to work in person. I think those are conversations we need to begin engaging in now, just in partnership and in good faith. And so I think those things begin yesterday, not when the cases start to fall.
And just trying to avoid this shouldn't turn into, for lack of a better analogy, a winter morning kind of scenario for parents. Like, do I wake up at 6 a.m. and are my kids going to school today or not, right? Like, I think that's the reality in January and February when we've got an ice storm running, but I really think that's the big transition, not only for our staff that may be coming back and may not be on a given week, but also for families in terms of, okay, well, now they're out of the house, but now I need to figure out childcare, if I can go back to work or not go back to work, and just, I would encourage us to try and think about this from a ramp up and ramp down and certainty, so that we're not sending a signal in the middle of the third week that, well, we think cases are going to be enough for us to open next week, but we're not sure, so just hold on, we'll figure it out. I think when we announce that we're going to do it, we need to be able to do that with enough certainty that it's going to be for a while, so that we don't ping pong back and forth and drive families crazy.
Yeah, I think that still a bit to that too. So we have begun conversations with OSCA and SCA, and one of their main requests has been making sure there is transition time and that we're not ping-ponging back and forth.
Isn't that part of the metrics, why the metrics were chosen the way they were, so that they would be a low enough threshold to help prevent the going in and out?
Yeah, the metrics have been picked to be low based on particularly examples out here where they've successfully and safely, restarted school. But then kind of the go back to where you were before metric is higher than that. So it's not like it's a red light, green light line, and one day you have too many or too few cases and you're good, and the next day too many and you're back up. And so yeah, it was designed to be low so that you could have some slippage back the other direction and not be whipsawing people back and forth.
I still think if we're talking about, 2 weeks on and then we got to go off again, and then I think that's, my sense is just for managing family dynamics, I know that we're anxious to get people back, but in terms of managing family dynamics and safety and being fair to our staff, we've got to make sure that we're going to be below it for a while, or as reasonably sure as we can. If it's at 4.9% positivity, I would argue that may not be quite enough to provide us security for a while, that we're going to be okay. Because if you're just below the line and then you tip back up and you get closer again and then you drop back down, especially in fall, we start moving people inside when we go through season, you're going to have a lot of back and forth. And that I'm concerned that we don't whipsaw families around. We need to be very cautious.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the good news in a county like Washington County with 600,000 people is unlike some really small counties, if you've got the cases down that low, it's really hard to have the cases down low and have the positivity be high. In some really small rural counties, you can actually have those two things be kind of cattywampus with each other much more easily.
Unless testing gets more restricted. And that's not an impossible thing, given what we're seeing happen with manufacturers. So that's where I get a little skeptical, is if our testing and capacity drops due to factors beyond our control, that could hurt.
Director Adamson, this is Nancy. Thank you for bringing that up and those concerns, because that is something that, as Mr. Emmert said, we have been talking about and we're hearing loud and clear. I would expect that Patina is hearing the same thing from her classified But that's what teachers are hearing, not only our K-3, but also all of our teachers across the board concerned about the families and also, you know, for them having enough time. So I just wanted to weigh in there. Thank you.
Just apologies if this is already out there. Did we set a deadline for registration for the cloud campus? Is that out there?
That went out today.
Yes, it went out today.
When is it?
We set a deadline, we asked for the 20th today, asked for register by the 20th. Oh, the 19th, I'm sorry.
I have a question about nutrition services, and I don't know if that's out of scope at this point, but we're gonna have kids that'll come off of availability of summer lunch programs and into the fall, but will be distance learning. Have we figured out what to do about that one?
Yeah, we will go into more depth about that on the 26th, included in the operations conversations, but Lizanne and Sandy are at the table in all of our COVID steering committee conversations. But Steve, of our group here, Steve and Jim work most closely with them. Are there some specifics that you could add to that? Knowing that we're going to talk a lot more about it on the 26th.
Yeah, they've actually already created, I think, what is a fairly nimble plan to be able to easily transition into back and forth between all comprehensive distance learning and making sure we're feeding kids and delivering meals. They have in their plan, unlike the spring, we would have hubs at each of our buildings, and then they would run bus routes to deliver meals, in addition to whatever other materials, packets, whatever else might need to be delivered. And so that has to be fleshed out, I know, further. And as Dr. Corey said, there will be more information on the 26th, but they're way down the road in their plans.
But that will continue with CDL at some level. Okay. Thank you.
So Nancy and Bettina, I would love to hear from you guys, and this is a question I think that we asked last week at our meeting, but for our board's benefit, what some of the primary concerns are that you're hearing from your members? And if you could, you know, Nancy, you talked a little bit about one of them, I think, just now. But what is it that you could share with our board around just things that are emerging among your membership that around CDL or opening in general that we could learn about?
I'll go ahead and go first. Thank you. What I'm hearing is there's a lot of concern from classified staff if they will have their full hours and how they're going to be utilized. There's a really big concern that with the comprehensive distance learning, that staff are not going to be able to have their full hours, therefore having a monetary shortage. And just with how things are already, you know, finances are tight for a lot of people. You know, our bus drivers, they've missed out on a lot of trips and routes through sports and field trips. So anything that's going to shorten their hours is really concerning for them. And then the other things are just concern about the mental and emotional welfare of our students, where many of us naturally want all of the kids to be there for the structure for their social emotional health, and then concern of getting sick and how that will look, subs, how will that be covered, those kinds of things.
Hi, this is Nancy again. So what we're hearing right now is, I think, just sort of an anxiousness to, get more details. We have had, thankfully, a large number of our educators working with our directors and administrators on the plans, but teachers that haven't been involved in that are just now coming back and engaging from a bit of a summer break, and starting to really, want to know more kind of the nitty gritty. And until we see much more detailed plans, I think then we'll kind of know, all right, what works, what doesn't work, do we have any issues? And then we'll be working with all of the administrative team to work those out. Certainly, as I had mentioned, they are concerned about families being able to, move back and forth, and what does that look like? And then another big one is, because of all of the moves, a lot of just when can we get into our classrooms and have time to really set it up and start thinking, even though the beginning of the year is going to look different than any other year ever, we still feel like we need that little bit of grounding as teachers to get into our rooms and actually get set up. So I think that it's going to come up as we get more details of the plans.
Thank you.
I've got a question back on Cloud Campus, if we could. Again, back in the theme of we're all getting pitched all kinds of things to buy these days. One of those is sort of ready to go online content and those kinds of things that go from Cloud Campus. Our plan is to basically deliver that using Sherwood curriculum. Can we talk a little bit about the thinking behind that?
Yes, so I will start, and Brady, then I'm going to hand off to you to speak to that, and then I want to hear from our levels. So one of the things that we do know is that this, as an aside, before Brady starts, this is a question that we also are extracting from social media today. And the question about why is the district not purchasing canned curriculum, but instead, using our own, and concerns about that, questions about that. One of the things in our reflections after our forums last night, we probably could have elaborated and should have elaborated more on our answer to that at one of the levels, maybe at elementary. So with that, Brady, what are your thoughts, and what are the pieces about that, the response to that question, that are most notable from your standpoint?
Thank you. Yeah, one piece that's within the ODE guidance talks about, to be wary of canned curriculum that an algorithm advances students through, just because of how inequitable algorithms are when it comes to assessing humans and addressing diversity in our students. And so that was one really key piece that, should be out there, is that investing in these programs means investing in an algorithm to help make educational decisions for our students instead of trained teachers and human beings. And that's one key piece in our commitment to equity and teaching all students, is to empower our teachers as humans to address our students who are also humans. Some other pieces to that kind of goes back to the investments that our district has been able to make along the years. As some of the conversation has been around, we have a lot of investments into pieces of our curriculum that are digital and have digital elements to them, and really complement a distance learning situation quite nicely. And finally, every single adoption that we go through is thoroughly vetted. It's a process involved with, the members of the school board, members of our teaching and learning staff, and teachers and administrators. And we feel really good about those processes and the learning outcomes for our students when we've picked that curriculum. And in this time, we felt really strongly that we needed to elevate elevate the role of our teachers and you know, them as professionals and their ability to make adaptations to a different model. And you know, we're really committed to trusting that student-teacher relationship to be really powerful and really important, and really trust the work that's been put in to select really high-quality curriculum that can be delivered in a wide variety of modes.
Thanks, Brady. So what does that look like, team, at your different levels? Like what comes to mind when you think about that answer from your perspectives related to the curriculum?
I feel like so much of what makes teaching fun and special for your class is that you tailor the lesson to the students, and you tap into their interests, you tap into their backgrounds, and you make it relevant to them. And I just feel like that connection and that sense of community is so huge, especially now. And the other part that I think is so important is that feedback. You know, students need that ongoing feedback, and the guidance is really clear about us providing that along the way so students can self-assess their progress and we can communicate that to families. And that's just something that you don't get in such an authentic way, in such a specific student-centered kind of way with the camp curriculum.
I agree with everything that Millie said. And at the high school level specifically, when we were considering how to operate in the cloud campus, we actually looked at some past practice that we have, which is using Odysseyware for our credit recovery at the high school level. And one of the challenges that we've had to navigate since I've been there and even before then is when a student wants to transition back into a sequence. The two things don't align. And so the student actually oftentimes is coming out of a deficit because they took Algebra 1 and Odysseyware, which was the CAN curriculum, and now they're coming back into Algebra 2 or geometry in our building with the CPM curriculum. And so the two just didn't really align. And so when we were considering it, we were like, we don't want to exacerbate that further. Students shouldn't have to experience that deficit in this particular model. We know we have enough other things they're trying to navigate, and so this was one that we could mitigate by saying, you know what, where you want to learn isn't going to impact how you learn, what you learn, all of those sorts of things.
I would add, you know, definitely from a high school perspective, but all the way across the district, our teachers are fantastic. And to sort of what Melissa said, and on a bigger picture, everything that I've done in the 10 or 11 years I've been here leads me to trust them to create the best thing for our students. Like Millie said, they know them, they know what they need, they know the style they should learn in, and those are the experts. I mean, you can get a CAN curriculum that does the job, but we have the best, and they're going to make the best, and so that's what I believe in, and that's what I think is going to result in the best things for our students to actually make adequate progress rather than just sort of checking boxes.
Elementary echoes all of the above. I think the same things apply as well. And knowing that no matter the choice, there's still this element of live instruction, right? That's a part of our ODE guidance and what we know is best for kids. And when we were meeting as an elementary team, to us it seemed more authentic and appropriate for that live instruction to support the curriculum work that we already support and have invested in and we know is successful, rather than our teachers be doing this live conferring with the program that they could know nothing about, right? Or the sequence of that, or the algorithm that's moving kids through. And so as we looked at it from an elementary perspective, again, right, we have fabulous teachers and we know that we've invested in the online resources and our curriculum programs are working hard to support us and to make updates all along the way. And so our first choice was to take advantage of all of those and put kid needs first, and to pick something that's going to set our students up for success, not just this year, but jumping back into future school years as well.
Other questions or topics or anything anybody would like to raise? Jessica.
So I know that this is what I just want to go back to the previous thing and just say I couldn't agree more. I mean, to me, the answer to that question is simple. We have the best teachers and we have invested in them, and we have great leadership here too. And we need to trust our team because they consistently produce outstanding graduates. Why would we do that for CAN curriculum? It makes no sense to me. So now I got it off my chest. My question is recognizing that as we're going to do the best we can for our kids this year, and we're going to try and catch them up from last spring and from being out of learning in person for a long time. But recognizing that, and I know this is like way early to be thinking about this, but just putting it on the list of things to think about how, knowing that we're going to go through this year and we're going to do the best we can, thinking about next summer, and for kids that haven't quite caught up to fully ready grade level to move on to whatever the following year is. The ability to use some of the lesson stuff that is done this year that is fully online digital, and how do we help kids still tap into that this summer and utilize some of those tools throughout the summer to be able to get caught up if they aren't quite ready by the end of next year, so that we can really start 21, 22 with kids really ready to go and being able to utilize all of the hard work that's going in this school year to make an online experience possible, so that we can get kids fully up to speed if they're still not quite there. Does that make sense? I know that that is so far away that we'll be at May before we know it. And so I just want
5 COVID years.
I'm very concerned about the ripple. I think that there's a possibility of that just, well, but regardless of whether that's real or not, I'm concerned about the ripple effects. Because we're going to have kids who, I think about my own kid who, he and I had this conversation earlier today. He struggled, and John, you remember this, he really struggled in first grade, and we didn't get a diagnosis on his ADHD, again, he's power abusive, until really the end of that first grade year. And if he were back at that stage now, how we get him caught up so that he's ready to go and jump into third grade really, really ready, I think would be really challenging. And as I think about my own kid with that struggle and the challenges that our special programs team has to come, I think about all of those other kids who are in that space right now and how we can use next summer to really get them back up to speed and feeling ready to go is weighing heavily on my mind, because I just know there are challenges that we're going to be sending some kids out without all of the tools, and that's hard. But how do we avoid having this year and part of last really ripple through the rest of their educational experience?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We've talked a little bit about it, not in any level of detail or anything. It's been sort of, we need to do something, because we did not determine what to do this year. It's sort of uncertain, and so thinking about what that looks like for next year. We hope to be able to offer, full day instruction plus maybe some after school stuff this year and make up for the summer, and that hasn't been able to come to fruition either. But that's good thinking, and something that's on our radar.
Thank you.
I really think it's great that you brought it up.
Other questions, thoughts, topics, speeches and questions, speeches only.
Speeches are fun.
I just wanted to take my mask off. No, I'm kidding. I like that a lot. I just want to say I'm not in awe of all of you. It makes me feel tired. The work that you've done consistently since March, 2013, 2012, whenever this all started. Just amazing. I'm so impressed. And to do all of this with the pressure of all of these outside resources and all of these claims and just all of this competition, really, it feels like for our kids right now too. The parents are struggling. We're all trying to figure out something that works. And I'm so impressed with the possibilities for all the kids. And the fact that once again, it's not a, we can, but we can, yes, and we're going to do this, and we're going to help the system. So I just really want to thank you. It's just amazing. Really proud to be part of this, and appreciate all of your work.
let me just maybe echo that a little bit. It's hard to realize that 10 months ago this virus didn't exist. And it's not been 6 months since we had our first case in Oregon. And the things that have happened and the way that society generally has changed, and the things that you all and we've done in this district in an unbelievably short amount of time, things that if we'd have laid out a work plan that looked like the last 5 months before you'd have thought we were starting again. It would have been mutually exclusive. Anyway, this has been a run where sort of flexibility and grace are important, where creativity has been really important, hard work has been really important, and that's not going to change going forward. We're a ways away from the backside of this, and so I thank you for everything that everyone's been doing. Thank you for our parents, for their grace and flexibility that we're going to continue to have to rely on as well. It's been a ride, and it's going to keep being one, so we'll keep at it. I think unless there's anything else, Dr. Cordy, we're about done with our work session.
Yes.
Or did I forget it?
No, you didn't. No, I just really appreciate the kind words on behalf of our team. And, my whole superintendent report in the regular meeting is about the administrative team. And, it's what I want to, because they all know that they can leave when this work session is over and the meeting starts. So I want to just, since we're on this topic, just take a minute so that all of you and any of the rest of our colleagues who will hear this can hear it. This is, it is a relentless grind. And every one of our administrators and staff have been working on this too, but I'm just talking right now about our administrative team and the work that started before the school year was ever over with. And there's a cycle to education, and the summer doesn't mean we stop. It just means we get to take a breath, and I kind of describe it, people go to their own corners and start working on, whatever with the scheduling and whatever with starting to plan for professional development and the team building and the excitement of the fall, and none of that happened. And we hit immediately the grind of anticipating and then creating plans and then getting new guidance and then monitoring and adjusting and then trying to keep up with keeping, our colleagues, our other stakeholders across the district involved in those conversations so that we didn't get out ahead. And it is not to sound dramatic, but it is that grueling pressure that I think all of our team members have felt because they've shared it with me in one way or another about the grind of this. And there absolutely are no easy answers. We're not going to please everybody. We just know that it's impossible. We keep students at the center of the conversations, and none of us as educators got into any, we didn't start off as teachers, to be exposed to these kinds of conversations and then become leaders and be met with these leadership challenges. It's beyond the scope of what any of us would have ever imagined, and none of us have ever done it before. I hope to goodness none of us ever have to. And the exhaustion is real, and the grace and kindness, we remind ourselves about that often, and there is just, through how hard this is, there is no other team that I can imagine in the state or beyond that I would want to be going through this grind with. They are the utmost of professionals with really big hearts, really hard workers, And we come at, like, when we experience the feeling of left turn at Albuquerque that comes from ODE to us, and then we get into ad council the next day with our team and lay out a whole new timeline and due dates, and guess what? Now we're gonna do a forum, and we've got about 48 hours to figure out how to do that. I mean, the level of professionalism is so noteworthy. And so I just thank you for the opportunity for me to get on my soapbox a little bit about how thankful I am and truly how proud of them I am.
And on that note, we're going to reconvene for an executive session, which will not be public at 6:30, and then for our regular board meeting, which will be streamed at 7 o'clock. And with that, the work session is adjourned.